and have seen the damage they have done to especially Black and poor communities. I've lived through Democratic presidencies, and I've seen the damage they've done too.
And then you come back and say, well, all of these tech jobs can't be filled because we don't have qualified people in this country to fill them. But what you don't say is how you took every science class out of our high schools. Have you defunded our high schools where we don't even have money to have science class?
Do something. Stop leaving our democracy, our country, and our lives up to 535 people who are basically just lobbying to keep most of the pie from you and me.
We need to heal this rift because this pro-religion, anti-religion rhetoric that's going back and forth from both sides is very counterproductive. Because if every Negro or every Black person was to become atheist tomorrow and not worship any God, I guarantee you we'll still wake up in the project, we'll still wake up with failing schools, we'll still wake up with all of the stuff that we're dealing with now because it's not the religion. It's not the religion. Our ancestors were able to build Black Wall Streets and build thriving towns. We don't need a Starbucks revolution. We don't need someone to say that Black Lives Matter, yeah, but not right now. We don't need someone to say that we'll get around to we don't need token liberalist policies, and that's what we've been suffering in the Black community so long, and Hispanic communities and poor white communities.
It's just politics, with innocent people caught in the middle.
Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vredos. I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College here in New York City. One of the greatest independent journalists and reporters of the 20th century, I.F. Stone, or Izzy as he was affectionately known, often remarked to journalism students to never forget that all governments lie. He spent 7 decades exposing deception and official lies by digging deep into government documents and transcripts, taking on McCarthyism, racism in the military, and the Vietnam War. In 1963, he wrote, "In the age of corporation men, I am an independent capitalist, the owner of my enterprise." We'll conclude our show today with a short video clip of Izzy's work and comments by independent journalists. His legacy, however, and the need for strong grassroots independent journalists today is the focus of our show, and is needed even more desperately in the face of today's overwhelming corporate control of the mass media. Here's a short list. Disney Television Group owns ESPN and ABC. Westinghouse owns CBS. General Electric controls NBC, CNBC, NBC Network News. Viacom owns MTV, VH1, Showtime, Comedy Central, Sundance, Nickelodeon. Rupert Murdoch controls Fox Television. 20th Century Fox owns over 132 newspapers and 25 magazines, including TV Guide, The Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post. CNN, owned by Turner Broadcasting, a division of Time Warner. We could go on and on. One more quote from Izzy. "To be able to spit in their eye and do what you think is right and report the news and have enough readers to make some impact is such a pleasure that you forget what you are writing about. You become, like a journalistic Nero, fiddling while Rome burns and having a hell of a good time, or like a small boy covering a hell of a big fire. It's just wonderful and exciting. You're a cub reporter, and God has given you a big fire to cover. And you forget. It is really burning." Well, we're really thrilled to have on the Radical Imagination show today 2 courageous young independent journalists and activists who have followed in this tradition. Pierre Omidyar and Jackie Lugman, founders of Woodstock Nation, a justice-focused social media reporters who want to amplify the voices of grassroots, political, social, racial, gender, and other justice activists on the issues that matter to them most, where they live. Their involvement spans decades and encompasses such diverse issues as anti-apartheid marches, AIDS research, direct actions, anti-war protests, anti-police brutality actions, support of community schools and science, and many more issues. They show the links between issues and becoming a vehicle for progressive activism on behalf of the marginalized. So welcome, Abdus and Jackie, to the Radical Imagination.
I'm thank you so
thrilled
much.
To have you here.
Thank you for having us.
And you came up from Washington.
We did.
To be with us, and that's I'm so glad you've been here. We met at the Convergence conference, right, a few weeks ago with Bernie.
Yeah.
And we were on a panel together about this, basically the same topic. And your energy was incredible. I'm so glad you could make it here today. And so tell me about your creation here, the Woodstock Nation. Right? As I was saying before the show, that there was an iconic radical from the 60s, Abby Hoffman, who wrote a terrific book called Woodstock Nations. So you're a nation.
Well,
what's it about?
Well, Woodstock Nation for us is more focused on the things that we're passionate about, which really is exactly what you said, amplifying the voices of people who we know are struggling in their communities. And we got that from living in marginalized communities ourselves and knowing the work that we've been involved in, and that we've seen other people be involved in, and also knowing that nobody pays attention to those people. No one comes to the community meeting at the rec center once a month. Nobody comes to the ANC meetings in DC, the advisory neighborhood council meetings, or whatever the equivalent is in each city and state. Nobody comes to the vigils that community members have, or the marches against violence and as well as police brutality when community members do come out for these things.
Nobody comes to report.
Nobody comes to report that
Right.
people in marginalized
To bear
communities,
witness. Right.
that people in marginalized communities do care about our communities. So for us, Woodstock Nation is filled with the voices of those people. That's what we want it to be. So we named it, actually my husband named it, sort of as a prophetic kind of thing, where we named it what we wanted it to manifest. And so we named it what we want our marching orders to be.
What you would like to see the entire nation become, more attuned to the voiceless and disenfranchised. So do I hear some religious roots or prophetic roots in this, or spiritual?
I mean, just to add on to what my wife said, we noticed that there was a void, and even within black media. And I was so glad in your introduction how you spoke about how the corporations are taking away media, and they're controlling the narrative for the most part. And so we saw that even with more black Pacific media, Ebony, Jet, and all those, that it was a class divide too. That these media outlets were the voice for the black middle and upper class, but they didn't give a voice to, as my wife said, the people who we lived around, which is the poor black marginalized people.
This is Washington. This is where you grew up?
Well, I grew up in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah. But they're all the same, you know. But we noticed that even with black media publications and other media, that they weren't speaking for the poor black, or as we like to call the masses, the majority of us that got left behind in the civil rights, from the civil rights era. And so we felt like that what existed as a vehicle for black voices, per se, wasn't really fully representative of the larger black masses who we live around and who I'm proud to say that we're a part of.
Right. But were there any models at all? I'm thinking about, for example, Glenn Ford, who's been on the show, Black Agenda Report. Now, was that a model, or was that somebody that you could look up to in a sense as that alternative vehicle? Were there others? And what do you think about Black Agenda Report? And it's for what you're doing as well. Is it kindred work?
Yeah, I do think it's kindred work, and it's kindred work in the sense that it's not focusing entirely on the exact same issues. Because what I love about Black Agenda Report and Glenn Ford and by extension, Ajamu Baraka and all of the other staff members of Black Agenda Report, they have an internationalist focus, which is something that most Americans don't have in regard to policy in general, and that especially a lot of black people don't have in this country in regard especially to our connection to Africa. So I appreciate that for Black Agenda Report, a lot of their focus is anti-imperialism, anti-war, and foreign policy as they relate to foreign policy, and how that affects us in America. But even though the focus is a little bit different, a little bit broader, those issues do affect the people we live around. They just don't know how they do.
Yeah.
So the concentration is on, as I think I said in the introduction, immediate effects and consequences for people's lives that they can touch and feel, and it's real. And then starting from there, right, raising awareness and consciousness. But it's again listening to the voices of the voiceless. That's where it starts. That's so important. And so I mean, I don't think we need to spend much time on why, or if we want to, you can't. The corporate elite, why it doesn't do that.
Right.
I mean, right? It's pretty obvious that.
Well, it's funny, while you were doing your introduction, I went back, because we all got a little gray here. So,
some more than others.
Yeah, but I remember coming up as a child and teenager that I remember making fun of state-run media like Pravda and all these. We used to pride ourselves on we have an independent media, like it's not state controlled, it's not this, it's not that. And
Voice of America.
Right, Voice of America, and I grew up with Walter Cronkite, so it was like and then we made fun of other nations and their media outlets. It was state controlled, and that's not what we wanted.
Stiff and formal.
Right, we prided ourselves on this freedom of the press and all these other values. And just to find out that that with your introduction is so true is that, okay, it may not be government controlled, but it's corporate control.
The corporate agenda, that's a great point, which is very much part of the creation of the sort of people you're trying to give voice to.
Right.
Exactly.
And do they and getting them to see that connection. They they feel it, but you're there to listen to them and put the dots together, right?
Yeah, because most people don't understand how long we've been fighting this beast of now the new term is well, it's not even a new term, and this is what is kind of frustrating for those of us. It's great that you introduced us as young.
I did.
Yeah.
You are young. Yeah.
We're 50. So,
well,
but
young at heart.
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
There we go.
We grew up in the Black Panther era, in the Black Radical era. Our parents were a part of that. Our parents were involved in that in a lot of instances, or our family members were involved in that. So there are terms now being used by newly aware progressives that were mobilized or inspired by the Sanders revolution.
Bernie pups.
Yeah, we call them the Bernie pups.
Yeah.
You know, they learn these words like oligarchy and
Plutocrat.
plutocrats, and they think
Class struggles.
Yeah, they think that they've learned something new, but this is stuff that we've been fighting for literally decades and decades and decades. So people don't know that this is not a new fight, that this isn't something that just became a thing in the past election, that this isn't something that Bernie Sanders or any other recent politician has just discovered and exposed. This has been a fight for most poor people in this country for a long time, and certainly for most people of color, especially Black people and Native Americans, since before this country actually formally existed.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get people to see the connection between that history and why they're struggling the way they are now
in the communities.
In the communities, yes, it is. And that's
is that partly because
order.
again they haven't been given the history as much as they needed to have to carry on the struggle? And how do you see Black Lives Matter fitting into all of this? Are they trying to carry on? Of course, they were heavily influenced by the Panthers, and so they have an understanding, and I think they're resonating, right, with a lot of young.
Right, and I think once again
Blacks.
we can't forget that what we're talking about is just a microcosm of really what's happening in the larger society, and what that is that media has failed to inform us. That was media's job. Media's job was to inform us. We were talking about, Jackie and I were talking about not too long ago about how we've been in this perpetual war in Iraq and Afghanistan, 17 years. And yet you don't see a mass anti-war movement as you did in the 60s.
Hardly anything.
No, because in the 60s, media actually showed you the body count.
Everybody's coming back.
Yeah, right.
Dan Rather was showing it to us on
Exactly.
television.
Yes.
Now what we have is that, and once again, going back to your point about how media is being controlled.
The message, yeah.
Right, the message by corporate interests is the fact that everything is sanitized now, and warfare is sanitized, and so we don't see the drone strikes. We don't see, we don't see the ugliness of war, and so my wife and I coming up here, talking about the militarization of our society, and we were coming through Union Station in D.C., and it just struck me as odd, and maybe the prophetic thing she's talking about. But when we were going up the escalator, they had this large banner, and they were talking about resources of steel and what built this nation. But the symbol they had was a tank. And so, Jackie and I, we looked at that and we said, we don't even realize how we are being manipulated to in this military-industrial complex. And media was there to basically put a check and balance on all of that stuff, to give us the opposing views. But now,
But here's no even mention of this.
right, they don't even mention it.
Recognition of it, and why this tank would be there.
Why would it, why?
There's
why,
no
why not a
dialogue, there's
bridge?
nothing.
Right. Why not a bridge? Why not, something else but a tank?
Right. And these are the kinds of issues that independent print media was largely responsible for informing marginalized communities on before, the social media explosion. You're talking about print media from organizations like the Nation of Islam, however people might feel about, certain issues that they have, the Black Panther paper, and even
East
modern,
Village Other and all that
the East
stuff,
Village Other, New Amsterdam News, independent Black papers in most majority Black cities. We work with a group now, our friends down in Richmond, the Virginia Defenders. They still publish a newspaper that focuses on issues that affect the poor Black community in the Richmond area, and their struggles with not just crime and how they're trying to fight crime, but how they're also trying to save their public schools and equitably fund their public schools and save the African burial ground at Shockoe Bottom from developers encroaching on the land, and trying to make the connection or help people understand the connection between all of those issues and taking down the monuments. So, I mean, these are weighty, heavy, enormous issues that a very small group of people have always felt tasked with, to try to get the masses to understand, to connect the dots. And before social media, it was really difficult.
Yeah, that's part of the dilemma, because you're dealing with sort of this hardcore awareness, and by definition, you want to get it spread around. So who are you going to spread it to?
Right.
You're up against the wall there with, to use another 60s term, all right, with trying to get it to the corporate media. It's not going to play there.
Right.
So now you open up this whole issue of social media. Now, how do you get your message out?
We use the tools that are there. Right now we use Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. We live stream a show twice a week.
Right.
You do?
Wednesday
Okay. In Washington.
In Washington D.C. from our own little studio on Wednesdays and Sundays, unless the other we have if emergencies or we just need a break, because sometimes we do just need a break.
We don't have a staff. This is the staff.
Yeah, this is the staff. Unless you want to count our dog.
Right.
Yeah, he's in your your what the clip there.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, he is a member of the staff because he demands to be. He will not be ignored. But this is these are our issues that especially Black people have been grappling with and trying to stem the tide against for decades. And the arguments, the issues, the balancing act, the who do we trust, the conspiracy theories that we talked about, the lack of support from corporate media. That's always been the reality for Black people in this country. So we have now this new, young, progressive political movement that wants a revolution.
That's absolutely true. I mean, 90% of those millennials under 30 are open to a system other than capitalism.
Right, and
so they're open to it.
Yeah, they're open to it, but the problem
and if they were the only ones voting, Sanders would have been the president.
Right,
exactly.
Right,
would be president.
Right, but the problem that we encounter in trying to push this revolution forward, like we've been doing, like our parents were doing, like our grandparents were doing, is that this new generation of political revolutionaries don't really want to listen to the people who've been in revolution the longest. So
too old school.
Right. Well, I think,
which you're not, but and Cornel Welsh is always going around saying that I'm old school. He's not that old school.
No. But part of it is also that's nothing new. I mean, don't trust anybody over 30 back in the
That's
exactly.
That was more the white counterculture.
Right.
Yeah.
But one of the challenges that we have in Luqman Nation, when you talk about getting out the message, one of the things that I might add is that one of the ways we get out our message is by appearing on many venues that we're invited to. And so that's why we thank you for this opportunity. Because
we thank you. We're going to get this out.
Yeah, because
a lot of people listening to this.
I mean, because social media is a blessing in one sense that it kind of democratized. Did I say that right? Democratized.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I got that tongue, But it kind of democratized information. So it really kind of.
So far, they're trying to cut that out too.
But that's the point I'm gonna get to.
Right.
In the beginning, it democratized information, so it kind of diminished the gatekeepers. Now, and you had people being able to do these things, but as you said, Jim, that the powers that be, they see, and they've been seeing this. They've seen the role social media played in revolution in Tunisia, the Arab Spring, and what happened around the world. And so, they've been aware that this could be a problem here. And so Jackie and I had said on one of our recent shows that we really feel that the window is closing on us being able to use social media and that platform. We talk about, again, talking about how we used to criticize other countries for controlling their media. And we even criticize places like China and North Korea for how they monitor the internet and cut off information to their people. But then we're moving in the same direction, you know. So and so I don't think that I think that we're not aware, because it's presented to us differently, that we're not aware that we're going to be suffering the same fate. You know, these oligarchies, or whatever you want to call them, the powers that be, as I like to stick with, they know that information is power. They also know that when people start to know how screwed we're being, how they're screwing us, then things happen. And so it's like, well, we have to, and I think that's the reason why it's been this push of the government working with corporations to control our access to information. Because if we don't have the information, then you know, how can we mobilize? How can we be informed enough to you know, make informed decisions, even in our politics? There is no way that an informed population should have chose Donald Trump.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely, and he got such incredible amounts of free advertisements.
Oh my God, yes.
So the media had a lot to do with promoting. I mean, if Bernie would have gotten, I don't know, a quarter of it.
Yeah.
And a serious debate, and you know, entertaining. You can make it entertaining.
Right.
And I mean, he's not the most entertaining, and he is in his own way. I mean, certainly up here in Brooklyn.
Uncle Bernie.
Right.
Uncle Bernie, come on, he's down to earth and all that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, because again, the communities you're talking about, what about the influence or support of the black churches? Where are they? And I wanted to also open that, our discussion up to Reverend William Barber's movement now too, and which I'm involved in, and we continue to watch what he's doing and bringing people on board here. There's a number of activists who've been on the show. So here's someone who has met with Bernie too, by the way.
Right.
I mean, the two of them together, wow. You know, the energy that gets the media, more the mass media, to pay attention here. Because, I mean, we've not had a speaker like Barber since,
oh my God,
Malcolm X, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
King.
Right.
Yeah.
A king. And,
Yeah.
So where are the black churches? The community.
You will be surprised at our views on the black church.
Ooh,
There
how
are what
much
now?
time do we have?
Oh,
left?
well, okay.
Yeah.
Ventilate, this is therapeutic. It's disturbing, isn't it? Huh?
It is very therapeutic. Talking out in the open outside of our own studio, you know, outside, because see, these are the kind of conversations my husband and I have all the time. I mean, we literally wake up on Sunday, we'll watch our favorite political shows over coffee while we're getting ready to go to church, and we will, you know, have these great conversations about what we just watched and what that means to us, what that means to the people we really live around, how many lies these people told, and, you know, what the truth really is. And then we are fortunate that we go to a church, we attend a church with a pastor who understands the prophetic, revolutionary nature of Jesus Christ of the Bible.
Okay. Right. Yes.
Who is very pro-black Lives Matter, pro-gender equality, and that is not what you find.
So you got your own Reverend Barber.
Reverend, yes.
Which they're actually our pastor, Reverend Graylan Hagler, longtime activist, was based long time in Boston, who went up against Whitey Ford. Whitey Bulger.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
You were, see, I'm an old Yankee fan here too, so I just took a double take. Whitey Ford, he's still alive.
Right.
That was my favorite Yankee pitcher. All right, that's another thing. All right,
it was Whitey Bulger.
Whitey Bulger.
Right. So, you know, we're fortunate. And I don't know what that fortunate is the correct word, because we had to look for him. And we actually found him by accident. Because before then, we attended a church that was very much typical, you know, predominantly black, pretty conservative.
The Southern Baptist?
It actually wasn't. It was non-denominational. And it was interesting because they were considered they were suspect. They were considered suspect by the actual Baptist church, the large influential Baptist church in the area.
They were troublemakers.
Right, because they were non-denominational and they were very casual and very, you know, not sticking to traditions, but neither one of those churches, neither one of those church models was active at all in social or racial justice.
That's true.
Not at all.
See, that's why I brought this up too, because this is so much of a moral issue. The integrity, the courage, and the prophetic tradition that you're representing, that the least of us, you're trying to, amongst us, trying to represent. The dispossessed, the disenfranchised, the voiceless. And that was the prophetic tradition from Christ. And in all the great belief traditions, non-belief traditions you have. See, I took my course with Radical Love with Cornell and David Kim at Union Theological. And I'm secular, but I'm from the prophetic Jewish tradition. And so when we get to that, we're, as Cornell and David Kim point out, we're talking about a Palestinian Jew. And Christ as a rabbi who, from that prophetic tradition, calling his own people out. So anyway, that's the interlinks that we all should be able to see that you're also trying to do.
Well,
here.
and the thing of it is, our view, specifically our view on the role of the black church is that, we feel that many of the black pastors that we've been seeing are really out for themselves. Liberation theology has been pushed aside for prosperity gospel. And so what we saw is that the black church, and I hate to be so broad, but that the black church, for the most part, have become a wing of, or I call the religious wing of capitalism.
I was going to say the corporate agenda, And let me chime in here with the synagogues as well. I mean, we're a good friend of my, Susanna Heschel. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That prophetic tradition, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with King. But we have that's far and few between. We've had Rabbi Michael Lerner on a couple weeks ago. Very good colleague. But these are the people that we need to connect with in all the denominations and all in the universities, and but you don't see it anywhere, including, of course, the media. I mean, Walter Cronkite, he was the most trusted man in America.
How about that?
And he had something to do, a lot to do with what happened in Vietnam.
Exactly.
Yeah, he did.
Now, who could we point to today? And again, we were talking about this a little more. The comedians, maybe. But again, they're comedians. Colbert and Jon Stewart's not around, and of course we were talking about Dick Gregory. But these are, in a way, what we're left with, in a sense, the prophetic voices.
And I think.
But going back to the black church here, why can't they support you? Why can't they help out in here and reach out to the community? And the young kids are wanting that. Because they don't want to sit and listen to they want it to be, real, right?
They want, instead of being preached to about, getting into heaven, these kids want help with, how do I get the police officers who don't live in our neighborhoods to see us and treat us like human beings? How do we get our school board to believe that educating us is as important as they clearly believe educating wealthier kids in whiter neighborhoods is to them? These are questions that a lot of kids can't articulate, maybe as well as we can at 50, but they're
the
clearly
preachers should know better.
Out. Well,
the preachers need you.
Here's the thing.
You're giving them the message that they should be giving.
Here's why so many black churches are not involved in social and racial justice work. Because there has been a concerted, a well-organized, concerted effort by conservative politicians to co-opt the Christian faith for political purposes. And a lot of black churches, not most, but far too many, signed on to the conservative, I like to call it the conservative white Republican Jesus message of Christianity, that brand of Christianity that focuses only on stopping gay marriage,
abortion,
ending education, sex education in public schools, transgender bathrooms, ending abortion, that kind of thing. Those were not even issues that were discussed in most churches during Sunday sermons
And certainly
before
not in the Bible
60s and
either.
the 70s.
Right, not at
They're
all.
not
Barbara would
mentioned,
say,
and
very
they're
little.
not
Yep.
mentioned in the Bible.
Right.
There were conservative, politically conservative forces who saw the Christian church as an enormous voting bloc that they didn't know how to mobilize. They wanted to win the White House, and they wanted to control the government. They wanted to control the state houses and every office in the country, and they didn't know how to do it until Jerry Falwell
Right.
and others got involved with defending Bob Jones University.
Yeah.
And they were defending Bob Jones University against losing its tax-exempt status
Right.
because of its racist dating policy of
Which
all
Trump, of course,
things,
wants to bring back.
Right.
which
Well,
Trump,
yes,
of course,
Take
wants
that
to
away,
bring
yeah.
back.
Yeah, right.
But instead of making the issue, what it was about defending a Christian college and their racist policy so that they could keep their tax-exempt status, the people who became the moral majority turned that discussion into the government is attacking our religious freedom. The government is
yeah.
attacking the
States'
religious
rights,
freedom
yeah,
of
individual,
Bob
yeah.
Jones University, and by extension, they're attacking the religious freedom of Christians in America.
Yeah, we heard
And-
that argument before.
And that's where that
Yeah.
argument came from,
Wow.
basically, and that is how the religious right political focus on Christianity, or their co-opting of Christianity, started. Most Christians in this country do not know that history. They really
White and
believe-
black.
White and black. And when you try to explain this, well, let me take that. When I have tried to explain this to my black fellow believers, they don't want to hear it, because they really do believe that they're voting. They're being told to vote for politicians who have Christian values, but they don't want to hear that these values are not biblical, they're not Christian, and they come from a place of racism and being and a pursuit of power and a pursuit
Right.
of
But
political power.
didn't King also get pushback?
Oh,
In his
absolutely.
age? When he came out against the
Absolutely.
Vietnam War, of course, the black establishment, white establishment, I mean, the majority of blacks were against it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, it's
But
a
I
majority
think
of
for
whites.
different reasons.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think the different reasons, I think,
He was
in my opinion, the pushback that King received is different from the pushback we're receiving today. I think the pushback that we're receiving today is basically, again, tied to the way how our culture has been structured by corporate values. So what I'm saying is that we're dealing with population who has been discouraged to critically think, and have been discouraged to receive outside information besides what's been spoon-fed to them. And so now you come, and this is why independent media is so important, because now you come with a different narrative, you come with different information, and because from grade 1 all the way up sometimes into college, it's been this corporate culture of cookie cutters and molding you.
not just sometimes.
Right,
It's
right,
got-
yeah.
So it's definitely there. It's
Exactly.
definitely-
Right.
The corporate agenda is
Right.
at John Jay College. It's all over the
Right.
country.
And so now the challenge for those of us who see past state-sponsored information,
Good way of putting it,
right,
yeah.
is the fact that now it's viewed as a threat, because it's been this as you said, this corporate culture of preparing the society to basically be fodder for the corporate machine.
It seems like we need to start organizing and bring a new counterculture
I
into the
agree.
fore,
Yes.
and begin to join forces.
Right.
Because we're definitely the majority.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Quandary
didn't want to
here.
lose this point, if I may, with the black church.
Yeah.
The biggest danger, or maybe that might not be the right word, but one of the biggest problems we have with the black church is economics. And I just want to make this clear, because that's another thing the corporate media doesn't talk about, is the wealth disparity of African Americans as opposed to white Americans. And the fact that you're talking about a wealth disparity that if it continues on this present trajectory, there was an article that was printed that said that in 36 years, there would be zero wealth building for Black Americans in this country in just 36 years. So, I mean, that's a grave, I mean, this is something serious.
It's existential.
Yeah, right. And yet you don't hear about it on the news. And then when we try to talk about it, and we do talk about it, the Black church is still the richest institution in the Black community. And they have not used that billions of dollars collected by the Black church, and they haven't been using it in ways that they could to help the community.
Yeah, because the Black church is still very, very much focused on the misinterpretation of scripture, and that we're
the
only
prophetic tradition.
just completely eliminating that and focusing only on telling most of the congregation of the Black church that the best we can hope for is to get our mansion in the sky after we die. But that's not the prophetic tradition of the Christian faith.
They're going to come at us after when this is done?
I know that it's going to be bad, but that's okay because we have
they're going to come at us.
because we know we have
we'll deal with them. We'll talk.
Absolutely. Because we know we have the prophetic
tradition. These are the people
tradition.
you should be listening to, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. But,
so we cannot have faith, any faith. It doesn't have to be Christian. You cannot have a spiritual faith if you are not using that faith to uplift the least among you. And that is the great awakening that we need to enact in the Black church.
Definitely.
Well, I think you are just unbelievably enthusiastic and so profoundly, I'm just very moved by your story and your efforts, and I just resonate enormously with it, and I think we're turning it around. I think with concrete movements like Barber's, Poor People's Movement, in which he is really trying to connect in a racial, in a religious, ethnic, and so on. And start with the poor, and we all are getting screwed by the system.
Oh, yes.
So are the great majority.
That's right.
And so I think there's hope. There's great hope. And I think there's enormous hope with voices that understand the truth at this level. Because I think that's where we need to start. And again, I know we just have less than a minute to go, but this went really fast. And we want to play a short clip on I.F. Stone and other examples of radical journalism. But tell us one more time again how people can get hold of you and perhaps listen to you and join your struggle as well.
Well, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Instagram under Luqman Nation, LUQMANNATION.
Well, if you go on Facebook, Coffee, Current Events, and Politics.
Okay.
Yes.
And we've played the trailer there, and we also will put that up on our credits as well. So
appreciate it.
Please support us on Patreon also, and because we're making a documentary for the first time.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. So wait, a few seconds. Okay, we got to wrap it up. So documentary will be out when, or this is terrific.
Well, it's scheduled for April of next year.
Okay, then you've got to come up and talk about that some more.
Wonderful.
It has been great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for
so much for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Luqman Nation.
Yep.
And thank you all for viewing The Radical Imagination. This is Jim Vredos. We'll see you again next week on The Radical Imagination.
Governments lie.
Misleading the public.
You must start as a journalist with the assumption that they are lying to you.
One of the great reporters of the 20th century, I.F. Stone, told journalism students never to forget that all governments lie. He could speak with authority, having spent 7 decades exposing deception and official lies by digging deep into government documents and transcripts.
I often think of I.F. Stone as the nation's first blogger. He really embodied this cantankerous, disruptive, insurgent energy that I think has come to be the defining attribute of political blogging at its best.
He gained his greatest fame and impact publishing the newsletter I.F. Stone's Weekly, taking on McCarthyism, racism in the military, and the Vietnam War.
Will you welcome this marvelous journalist, Mr. I.F. Stone?
We haven't been able to get it through our heads that this is a political war. What you have to ask yourself is, why is it that here are Vietnamese on one side, on our side, and here are the same Vietnamese on the other side? And on one side, they have very little in the way of arms. They have no Air Force, no napalm, no big boom boom, and they really fight magnificently. And on our side, you have 5 times as many troops, all that equipment, all that firepower, all that artillery, and they're not worth a damn.
Why is this?
Because the men on the other side feel they're fighting for freedom. They're fighting for freedom from domination by the white man and by the Westerner.
There are few people that I can think of in American history that better represented the best journalism in a democratic society than I.F. Stone.
Somebody had recommended highly that I begin reading what I.F. Stone's journalism was about and sent me a couple of links. And I read the first 2 and I was so blown away by them. I just instantly became almost an addict of the newsletters and found online a repository of all of his newsletters and just began reading one after the next. And didn't stop until a month later when I had read, I don't know, not dozens, but probably hundreds.
I can draw a line from I.F. Stone directly to what I'm doing now, because he played, though I didn't know him at the time, he played such an important role in inspiring me to think a different way.
There's several dozen ways to cover this Capitol. You can sit up in the press club and cover it off the press release table. You can play ball with the administration and the cabinet members and get it that way. You can be a heretic the way I am and get it that way.
29-year-old high school dropout says he is the source of those leaks about the government's secret surveillance programs.
The identity of the man who sent the Obama administration into defend and explain mode this week. His name is Edward Snowden.
He knows the U.S. will try to catch him and put him in prison.
How did Snowden find you? When did he reach out to you?
Glenn Greenwald is the journalist responsible for releasing the information leaked by Edward Snowden. He joins us from Rio. Good evening, Glenn Greenwald. First of all, why should you be the arbiter about what is in the public interest and what is vital to national security?
I'm not the arbiter of that. I work with a huge number of Guardian editors and some of the most experienced national security journalists in the world.
I consider Glenn Greenwald the closest thing we have to a living, breathing I.F. Stone.
Would you be prepared to return to their rightful owners such files as are currently in your possession?
The rightful owners of the information in these documents are the American people who paid for them and whose government should not have been hiding these programs from them.
What I want is somebody that can lay out some plans to trap these guys and whip hell out of them, kill some of them. That's what I want to do.
A classic example of I.F. Stone's ability to ferret out something when no one else was doing it was the Gulf of Tonkin excuse for going into Vietnam.
I'll try and bring something back that will meet that objective. Give up.
My fellow Americans, renewed hostile actions against United States ships on the high seas in the Gulf of Tonkin have today required me to order the military forces of the United States to take action in reply.
3 weeks after we had the so-called attack by the North Vietnamese, Izzy read all the after reports, and he said, where is the debris? If we had been hit, why isn't there more being talked about? And he said there were all kinds of excuses why this little tiny country would go against the largest fleet in the world, except the fact that it might have been provoked. If the mainstream media had followed Izzy, we might not have had that 10-year disaster.
Izzy was debunking the fictions coming out of government as soon as they came out. He did it week after week around the Vietnam War. So the beauty of Izzy, I think the lesson that independent journalists learn from Izzy today is not to be complicit in the official fiction, to start fighting through the cover stories on day one.
What his weekly taught me was that it didn't need to be fancy. It didn't need to have a lot of production value. It just needed to tell the truth and to tell me things that I'm not going to learn anyplace else.
My father really believed in the importance of a free press. He once told me, if something goes wrong with the government, a free press will ferret it out and it will get fixed. But if something goes wrong with the free press, the country will go straight to hell.
ما خودمون میبریم تیارا رو میخوایم دیگه باز چاقو رو گرفتن دم زخمایشون یا زخمی بود اینجا رو میکشید سرای من گلولار.
You saw the U.S. forces take the bullets out of the body?
Yes, I remember.
Jeremy Scahill.
This designation is a tremendous honor, and I want to pledge to use this opportunity to educate a new generation of young journalists about the incredibly important work of I.F. Stone. This isn't a career, this isn't a profession. Journalism is a way of life.
I got to meet I.F. Stone in the mid-'80s in Washington, D.C. I wanted to put up my own weekly, Moore's Weekly, and I just wanted to go and talk to him about it. And it was just an amazing afternoon that I got to have with him, to really kind of pick his brain and tell him, you know, what I wanted to do, and he gave me, you know, good advice. His great motto of all governments are run by liars and nothing they say should be believed. And he said to me, but I would expand that now to governments, corporations. You know, it's not just the government. It's that anybody in power.
A lot of times, some of the worst truths are hidden in plain sight, and that the point of a journalist is to try to dig through what is intentionally an overwhelming mountain of bureaucracy, and that's what Izzy Stone was just a master at.
This is the typewriter on which my father typed with 2 fingers.
So how long was he using this typewriter for?
Well, as long as I can remember, really.
It's amazing that he would type with 2 fingers. So he never learned how to type with.
He wasn't very mechanical. In fact, our cars kept breaking down because he never changed the oil.
Now, if you're a journalist doing that kind of work, your computer could be hacked. It'd be very difficult to hack I.F. Stone's typewriter.
So usually, if you want to pursue independent journalism, you start your own blog, you do it on your own, or you use the I.F. Stone model in his time, which was to create your own newsletter and rely on reader subscription that lets you eke out a living, but not really build a meaningful news organization. But one of the things I've learned over the last 10 months in doing the Snowden reporting is that if you really want to do sustained investigative reporting against the largest political and corporate factions, you actually do need funding. It is a necessary evil. You need lawyers to protect you, and technologists to enable the work, and researchers and editors and other journalists who are going to work with you.
You know, it's one of those insane stories in life, and in the context of media culture where we're all struggling to figure out how to pay for journalism, something extraordinary happened, and that is that Glenn gets this email from a mutual friend of his and Pierre Omidyar. And I had never heard of Pierre Omidyar. And it turns out that Pierre Omidyar was the founder of eBay and something like the 120th richest man in the world. We Googled him, and he was worth like $9 billion. And this friend had said, you know, Pierre wants to talk to you, Glenn, about potentially working with him on a media organization he wants to start.
Glenn Greenwald has been a lightning rod for controversy since he obtained those secret NSA documents from Ed Snowden and published some of them in The Guardian. Now he's launching a media company backed by wealthy eBay founder Pierre Omidyar.
We really wanted to create a model that took the virtues of both worlds and to build a news organization that, at its core, was designed to empower journalists to pursue their journalistic passion the way that they wanted to, that led them into journalism in the first place. And to me, that might even be the spirit of I.F. Stone more than anything else, which was that the essence of his journalism was that he was beholden to nobody.
We see this work that we're doing and that other people are doing as part of the tradition of I.F. Stone.
Well, I mean, if you had to come up with a slogan for what our new media venture is, the one that Jeremy Scahill and Laura Poitras and I are building under the aegis of First Look Media, you probably could use as a slogan the spirit of IF Stone, but funded with $250 million.
46 بماء 5 حريم يحملين في بطونهن أجنة.
Here in El Majala, despite the official denial, they'd left their fingerprints strewn across the desert.
The Vietnam War has been a terrible defeat for all the brand names we believe in, for General Electric and General Motors and AT&T, for all the great corporations, all the great industry that do the push buttons. When they turn to war, they know how to kill people en masse. And here down in the jungle, way below, is this strange creature that we can't crush, this strange animal we can't kill. It's time to look closely at it and see, by God, it's a human being. We have to begin to enjoy the differences in the human family. But either we learn to live together or we die together.